We are here today with John DeFilippis, who is going to tell us all sorts of interesting thing about his book series, which, if I'm getting this correct, is The Medallion of Mavinor, which sounds really interesting. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're working on at the moment, and then we'll get into your other books.
Oh, thank you. So, well, first of all, I'm actually not working on anything at the moment because I'm just so wrapped up in work. I'm actually not a formally trained writer. I'm an educator by profession. I have a PhD in educational leadership. I've worked in higher education and K-12 schools, and currently I'm a professor at a public university here in New Jersey.
Ah, so things are a bit crazy right now.
Things are a bit crazy right now. Yeah, the transition to remote instruction has been, quite a challenge for all of us. But we got through it. The semester ended on Wednesday, and we made it through. Thank God.
Well done.
Yeah, thank you. But I actually started writing back in 2010 when I lost my job after the Great Recession.
Ah, yeah.
Saw that as an opportunity to write the book I always wanted to write. And finally, when I got the time, I managed to do it and got published by Crossroad Press. Dave Wilson signed me to a contract to write a series of books, and so I continued to do that. But lately, I haven't been working on any projects. Again, I've just been so busy with work. I just haven't had time to do anything.
Life does that sometimes.
It sure does. It sure does have a way of getting in the way, right?
Right. Absolutely. Now, the series that you do have out, is that complete?
It is complete. It is. There are 4 books in the series. The initial book is called The Quest of the 13, and then there are 3 sequels following. And it's in the tradition of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. I mean, that was my influence. Tolkien was a big influence on me, of course.
Tolkien.
You're a Tolkien fan, I take it?
Yeah.
Okay, good. And then, of course, that Tolkien, when he wrote The Lord of the Rings, he said that fundamentally it was a Catholic work, unconsciously so at first, but consciously so in the revision. And of course, if you read the book or watch the films, the Catholic influence is so clear. And for me, having grown up as a devout Catholic and just being a religious person, I wanted to write my own fantasy series and take things even a step further than he did, in that, I wanted my books to be consciously, Christian from day one. And, it hits you with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer when you read my books, the Christian influence. But that's what I set out to do. And so I managed to finish the series, and just very proud that I was able to do that, because not everyone gets to fulfill their dream, right?
Sure, yeah, and it was very exciting. All right, so now we have to go in and talk about a little bit of the premise of these stories, because if you're going to, be very consciously Catholic, that is always very interesting, because not everyone knows all of the details.
Yes. So basically, the premise is it's a medieval setting, a kingdom, a king who is single, alone, childless, and he's getting old and he's ill, and he needs an heir. And he's just not sure who he's going to leave the throne behind to. And he gets a sign from scribes who are trying to recoup the scrolls. So the scrolls were kind of like their Bible.
Okay.
They were destroyed years earlier in a war with a kingdom. A kingdom had invaded, destroyed the scrolls, and they're trying to put them together piece by piece.
Oh, interesting.
And they come across a passage that seems to have the secret to him locating his heir, that he has to assemble 13 men and send them on a great quest to a certain location to locate a sacred object, the Medallion of Mavinor, and that the one coming back bearing the medallion would be his heir.
Oh, so only one.
Only one. So from there we go into how he assembles the 13. I introduce you to the characters, and of course we bring them together. We start building a dynamic, and then from there they set out on their quest. And the remainder of the book is just 13 men on a quest.
Aha. Now, this only one person returning type of thing, I imagine that's a bit problematic.
I'm sorry, I might have misspoke. I didn't mean to say that only one of the 13 would return.
Oh.
One of them would be bearing the medallion.
Got it. Okay, because everyone going on a quest and only one coming back is usually like, oh no, these poor characters.
Yeah. Well, not all of them can come back, right? I mean, come on, there has to be some loss.
Oh no.
And anything worth getting, it's there has to be some sacrifice. But anyway, it was the one who would come back and bear the medallion is the one who would be king.
Aha. Okay. Interesting. Now, I imagine then that there's some inner conflict within this 13 group. Simply, do they know that the one who bears the medallion back is going to be king? Do they have to struggle about this? Because
they don't know that.
Okay.
They don't know that. That said, there is, of course, internal conflict because you have at least one among the 13 who is really out for himself and out for glory, not for the betterment of the kingdom. Becomes apparent, I think, pretty quickly who that is. In a certain rivalry develops on their way through the quest in the northern mountains. And it's really interesting how that dynamic develops over time. It's funny because when I write, I don't know what your style is, but I tend to be more of an architect than a gardener. You're familiar, I'm sure, with George R.R. Martin and his two categories. I'm an architect. I put together pages and pages of outlines before I even wrote page one of the book. I had to have every little thing planned. And as much as you try to do that, when you start writing and you get to a certain point, you start to see the story taking on a life of its own. And it goes in directions that even you as the author did not anticipate.
I'm familiar with that one.
So you kind of have to be a little flexible and learn to just go with it,
Sure.
At that time. And I was, at times, again, it took me in directions that I didn't think it was going to go, and I just went with it, and I'm actually really happy with the way it turned out, even if it did deviate somewhat from my original outlines.
That's all right. If it deviates and you're okay with it, then things are usually all right. And if it deviates and you have no idea what's going on, then you have a problem.
Right, exactly.
Okay. Now, knowing the Christian tradition and the Tolkien-style tradition, there is an opposing force, I would imagine. Tell us a little bit about your opposing force.
The opposing force, of course, is based on, Satan, the fallen angel. And so there is a character in the first novel who's introduced, who towards the end you can see where things are turning. And then in book 2, he completes his transformation and becomes the opposing force. He's quite a force to reckon with, actually. And in those last two chapters of the story, the last 2 books, he's really he's a problem. A good guy.
Yeah, which, I mean, that's kind of the whole point of having the 2 sides, as opposed to the anti-hero or things trying to be continuously gray, depending on the genre, which Tolkien style.
Yeah, it's funny, and I've heard George R.R. Martin talk, and how he likes gray. He doesn't like black and white, and of course that his characters in Game of Thrones, that they're so complex. You just have so many. They have a good side, a bad side, and me, I guess it's just my upbringing. I tend to prefer black and white, and good guys are good and bad guys are bad. And even though I know that even the bad guys have, the worst person has some good in them, you'd like to think. The best person still has somewhat of a dark side.
Sure.
And I think that does come out at some points in my novels. But for the most part, the good guys are good and the bad guys are bad.
Not a bad way to be. Okay, so tell us a little bit about the writing process post the giant architecting stage.
So, I developed these outlines back in the 2000s and never even got around to writing page one. It was just, I had these outlines on my computer for so long, and I was working at a university. I was a director in academic affairs. I had a pretty big job. And, in 2010, when the Great Recession hit, as you know, there were budget cuts
everywhere.
Here in New Jersey, Governor Christie hit the universities and the schools with some draconian budget cuts, and they lost so much money that they had to cut positions. My position was a relatively new position. Because I was one of the last ones in, I was one of the first ones out. And at first it was a shock to the system because I had never lost my job before. And it was weird to be out of work and to suddenly not know what you were doing. And I said, you know what? I'm going to turn this calamity into an opportunity. I've got all these outlines. I've never written page one. It's time to finally do it.
Yep.
And I sat down, and I have to tell you, for me, page one was the hardest page to write.
Oh, no.
It was the hardest, but once I got into a groove, it just seemed to flow, and it worked. And for each book, it probably took me, I'm going to say maybe 6 to 9 months to write each book, each entry in the series.
Sure.
Somewhere around that. And like I said, for the most part, it flowed well, although there were, of course, we all get writer's block from time to time. And there were certain points that I reached where I struggled. Even though I had the outlines, sometimes I would get to that point and I would say, wait a minute, I didn't think about this, or I didn't think about that. And now I see where it's a problem.
Oh, no.
I revisit this and see. So sometimes I would be stuck at certain points for a week or even longer. And then, thankfully, finally something would come to you and then you break through.
Sure.
But it was an interesting process. So for me, though, again, being an architect and having those outlines to guide me, I just followed them as I did writing.